Alrighty, hi guys. My name is Samantha Kester. I am a master's student here at Central Washington University, and I am also a registered dietitian nutritionist and a clinical dietitian. Now, my project was on investigating the relationship between diabetes specialist visitations on patients' hemoglobin A1C status using NHANES 2013 through 2018. So, giving a brief overview, we'll first go ahead and talk about what an A1C value is. So, hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month blood glucose average of glycemic control. Now, the American Diabetes Association recognizes this percentage of 7% to be the protective effects percentage range, where we are lowering the risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke and all of the other long-term complications with uncontrolled diabetes. Now, anything above 7% is considered to be uncontrolled diabetes, and in 2019 through 2021 alone, about 47% of those who were diagnosed with diabetes had an A1C of 7% or higher. So almost half of those who were diagnosed. So that leads us to the question about diabetes specialists. So, is there an association of recent diabetes specialist visits and better glycemic control among people with diabetes? So, in order to complete this study, I utilized NHANES, which is the National Health and Examination Survey. Now, this is a nationally representative study where they gather everybody from the United States and they break them up into different stages. And from there, the participants are chosen. Now, one participant represents up to 65,000 other individuals like themselves, so this allows me to get a larger sample size as well. And NHANES is composed of a questionnaire survey as well as the laboratory data and the physical examination piece. Now, questionnaire looks at eating habits, healthcare visits, physical activity, diagnoses, whereas laboratory data is looking at blood draws, so the A1C value, cholesterol levels, fasting blood glucose levels, and so much more. And the physical examination piece is looking at height and weight, as well as subcutaneous fat, so on and so forth. So, in order to take the NHANES survey that was completed through 2013 through 2018, we ran it through a program called SAS. Now, this has its own software language, which allowed me to use the statistical analysis. So we looked at the descriptive statistics, the chi-square analysis in order to determine the difference in prevalence, as well as the odds ratio calculated using simple and multivariable logistic regression analysis. So for the data collection piece, of course, we used 2013 through 2018 through the SAS programming, and they had to answer these few questions. Have you ever been told a doctor that you have diabetes? When was the last time you saw a diabetes nurse educator or dietitian for your diabetes? Do not include doctors. And then, of course, they had to go to that mobile examination center in order to get their hemoglobin A1C value drawn. And of course, this study goal is going off of the American Diabetes Association's guideline goal of 7% or less. So after all of this and excluding and including all the participants that I possibly could, we were able to break down the descriptive statistics. So within this, we have 2,367 participants, those of which 860 never saw a diabetes specialist. 954 saw one within 2 years, and 553 saw a diabetes specialist more than 2 years ago. Now, really interestingly, males and females, there was no significant difference among those who participated in diabetes specialist visits versus those who did not, but we did see a difference in the age group. So, a p-value of less than 0.05 was considered statistically significant, and this age group is finding to be a p-value of 0.008. Now, with this, we saw more patients were in this age 40 to 59 group, so 711 of them, and 1,477 were above the age of 60. Now, this is to be expected given the increase of age increases your risk of developing diabetes. But what was really interesting as we actually saw more participants in this age 40 to 59 group. So we want this percentage of never seeing a diabetes specialist to be low, because that means they've seen a diabetes specialist and they've gotten the education. So we are seeing 32% of those who are age 40 to 59 never saw a diabetes specialist, where 44% of those in ages 40 to 59 were able to see a diabetes specialist within 2 years. Now, moving on to the race and ethnicity group for the descriptive statistics, this one was another one who was found to have a statistic difference among the different groups. Now, we are seeing, of course, a higher prevalence of non-Hispanic whites with diabetes, but interestingly, those who are among different ethnic minority groups are at a higher prevalence of developing diabetes. They are a more vulnerable population. So, this being said, we are actually seeing more non-Hispanic Blacks within who are seeing a diabetes specialist. So, 30% of those who are non-Hispanic Black never saw a specialist, where almost 50% of those who are non-Hispanic Black were able to see a diabetes specialist within 2 years. So, of course, this is really awesome because that means that we are getting those referrals sent for those um, vulnerable populations in order to control their blood glucose levels. Now, we also looked at the education level and poverty income. So there was no statistic difference between the poverty income ratio and seeing a diabetes specialist. However, there was a difference among the education level. So we actually found individuals with less than a high school education actually had the highest rate of never seeing a diabetes specialist, with roughly 44% of this population never seeing a diabetes specialist. So is this correlated with lower income jobs that those with minimal um, lower degrees tend to have? That is an interesting part of this study, an interesting question that is raised. So moving on to the actual meat and potatoes of the presentation, which is the A1C values. So we were able to look at the prevalence of the subjects who met the A1C treatment targets stratified by the diabetic specialist visitations. So with this, we found those who were within this treatment target of 7% or less. There is 48% who were able to meet it, whereas unfortunately, 51% of this population exceeded the 7% range. Now, we do go further down the line where we see those who never saw a diabetes specialist ended up almost 55% were able to meet their treatment target, whereas those who never saw a diabetes specialist, 45% of them actually exceeded the treatment target. So this tells me those who never saw a diabetes specialist probably had an A1C value that was already low, below 7%, and didn't need the additional support and education that a diabetes specialist can provide. Now, my theory is further confirmed when we are going down into the diabetes specialist visits within 2 years, where we see a 57% of this group exceeded the treatment target, and 42% were within the treatment target range. So the percentage between those who never saw a diabetes specialist versus those who saw one within 2 years decreased when it comes to the treatment target. So this tells me that they were probably diagnosed at a much higher A1C and it took years to come down. And again, building on top of this theory, it goes further into the diabetes specialist more than 2 years ago, where we are seeing a higher amount of those who are able to meet the treatment target of 7% or less. We're almost 55% of the participants who did participate in a diabetes specialist more than 2 years ago were able to meet this treatment target range. So again, I believe this is all related to time and it taking many years to understand diabetes and how it works with their body and get their A1C back under control. Now, we looked at the odds of meeting a hemoglobin A1C treatment target stratified by the diabetes specialist visits, where we did see a significant difference among those who had seen a diabetes specialist within the past 2 years when compared to those who had never seen a diabetes specialist. So, with the odds ratio of the 0.616, this is actually saying the participants were 38% less likely to meet the A1C treatment target goal compared to those who had never seen a diabetes specialist. So, again, this I believe is going into the theory of time. So, it does take time to bring their blood sugars down. And it also has potential for those who had never saw a diabetes specialist, were able to bring it down with just the basic education that was given at time of diagnosis versus needing the additional appointments needed. Alrighty, so when we are comparing the odds ratio, this is further confirmed with this theory here of time, needing time to bring A1C levels down compared to those who never needed the additional support of seeing a diabetes specialist. But we actually saw males were also statistically um, a significant factor. So males, when compared to females, were less likely to meet their A1C treatment target with a p-value of 0.0018, which is, again, really interesting. They were 33% less likely to meet the treatment target goal. When we are comparing all the different ethnicities compared to non-Hispanic whites, there was no difference of those who were meeting the treatment target of 7% or less. However, when we are looking at the age groups compared to 20 to 39-year-olds, those who are 40 to 59 years old were actually less likely to meet the A1C target compared to those who are the young adults in the group. So I would have thought this would have been different given the larger age group of those who were in the 60 plus range. There were more participants in this, but given the ages of 20 to 39, these participants were probably more likely to have type 1 diabetes, and they could be on an insulin pump, which does a lot of the work for them compared to those who are just managing their diabetes with nutrition and lifestyle management factors. Now, there was no difference between the odds of meeting the A1C treatment target versus the poverty income ratio, as well as the education level. We didn't find any statistic differences. Now, for conclusions, answering my question was, is there an association of recent diabetes specialist visits and better glycemic control among people with diabetes? Unfortunately, this study specifically was unable to draw the conclusion that meeting the treatment target of 7% or less is directly related to the diabetes specialist visitation rates. However, the factors could be contributing to this is the time needed to bring down blood sugar levels. We are also missing the pre and post diabetes specialist A1C level range to see if how much of an impact a diabetes specialist actually has on A1C. Unfortunately, with the NHANES and how it's set up, we couldn't do one at time of diagnosis versus a few sessions after seeing a diabetes specialist. And of course, we are missing populations who could be in nursing homes, specifically within the older population. However, it was interesting to see some notable findings such as age, race, and ethnicity, education levels, and poverty income levels all play a role in the diabetes specialist visitation rates, especially within those vulnerable populations among those who are a part of minority populations. We are seeing those referrals go through, which is really great given that they are a vulnerable population, and we want to be there to support them and provide them with the education so that they have a long and healthy life. Now excuse me, now the strengths and limitations of this study. The strengths were that this was nationally representative data and the sample size was quite large. And also the mobile examination center that NHANES was able to provide, we were able to collect the participants' A1C levels, so we didn't have to rely on memory, which could have been an issue. Now, of course, limitations, there were no pre and post diabetes specialist visit results. Now, I put asterisks by this because this would have actually answered my research question. So this was a major limitation for me. The method of diabetes treatments, such as insulin pumps or just lifestyle modifications or oral medications, was not defined in this study. And I felt like this would have been a contributing factor to the study as well. And of course, we are unable to distinguish between the different types of diabetes that a participant may have. Alrighty, moving on to the questions. So if anybody has additional questions about this research, feel free to email me. My name again is samantha.kester at cwu.edu. And I would love to hear from you, hear any feedback. And yeah, I just want to thank you for the time and your attention. Thank you.